Hello friends, I am Chevy. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it is fantastic and I hope you had a wonderful, amazing weekend. Please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you. Last week, I came on here and I told you that Lord of the Rings is the greatest fantasy series ever written, and I meant it. But I also mentioned Harry Potter in that video. And I also realized I've never really talked about my relationship to Harry Potter. And the interesting thing is, I was reading Tolkien when I was in middle school, well, elementary school probably, and then middle school, which is, the target audience for the first couple of books of the Harry Potter series. But when Harry Potter came out, I was a late teen. I was in, the ends of my high school. And in fact, when did Harry Potter come out? I don't honestly even know the publication date of Harry Potter. 97. Yeah, that's the year I graduated high school. So Harry Potter came out when I graduated high school, and it was an instant, well, it wasn't, but it was pretty quickly a worldwide phenomenon. And I didn't read it because at that point in time, I was into kind of darker fantasy, and I was reading, I was doing a lot of role playing, a whole lot of role playing. I was reading a lot of noir and traditional fantasy, like The Lord of the Rings and Discworld and that sort of stuff. And Harry Potter seems like this juvenile thing to me. And I've always, my entire life, I've had this sort of apprehension towards anything popular. Usually when something becomes a massive success, it's pretty hollow. I find that in order for something to be a worldwide phenom success, it needs to kind of be shallow and approachable for anybody. And that's what I thought about Harry Potter. So I didn't read it. I didn't read it for a long time. All of my friends were reading it. It was every message board at that time I went to, every chat room, everybody was talking about Harry Potter. There were Harry Potter channels in all the chat rooms. Harry Potter, Harry Potter, Harry Potter. And I avoided it until I went to a friend's house in the Marines, and I was really into his wife. She was super awesome, and I just everything about her, right? And she would sit and read Harry Potter over and over. Every time I saw them, she was reading Harry Potter, and this was years. And I think at that point in time, we were on book maybe 4. I think 4 had come out and 5 was about to come out, and I must have seen her read through all 4 books at least a half dozen times. She just would start over and read them again and again and again. And so one day I asked her about them, and I started, because let's be honest, I was a 20-ish, 19, 20 something year old. I had a lot of hormones, so getting to spend time with her and talk was awesome, and I wanted to spend time with her and talk. So we talked about Harry Potter, and she convinced me to read it. So she loaned me the first 4 books of the series, and I took them home on a Friday night. I think we had played D&D that night, and then I left his house with the first 4 books in my hand. And then I read all 4 of those books in the next 2 days. I didn't leave my room. I stayed in the room that weekend, and I read Harry Potter front to back, 4 books, done. And it was awesome. I actually really enjoyed it. I stopped at the end of it, and I thought, man, that was a wild ride. It's so fun. And then I didn't read them. I still haven't read them. I still have not finished reading the last 3 books. I have watched all the movies multiple times. I've played all the video games. I've taken my house test. I've done all the things except read the last 3 books, and I need to do that. But I didn't fall in love with the series, I guess, until M came into my life. M is a huge Harry Potter fan. We have 2, maybe even 3 entire shelves of our bookcase dedicated to Harry Potter. She has the various collector's editions and different spine printings and whatnot. She convinced me to watch them because I hadn't watched the movies. And I said, okay, let's try it. And I watched them, and I was remembering the first 4 books as I was watching them. And by the end, it was like, this is an amazing series, right? It's so fascinating. So like I said, since then we've played all the Lego games. I've played all the various Harry Potter phone games. I've listened again to the first, I think, 3 books. In my attempt to try to listen to audiobooks, I read Harry Potter, but I have a really hard time with it. I think it is a fantastic series, and I think part of the reason is, if you go back to what I said earlier on, the first few books are aimed at middle schoolers, and that's kind of the point. Harry Potter starts his adventure at 11, and so this first book is an 11-year-old, and the second book is a 12-year-old, and the third book is a 13-year-old, and the books age with him, and the reading difficulty, the material, all of those things grow with the series and with the reader. At that time, these books were coming out about every year, every other year, so it was growing with the audience, and I think that in and of itself is completely fascinating. Usually when I find a kid series, like, say, can I call Redwall a kid series? I think it is. It just kind of stays in that lane, and it is what it is until it's finished. Or Narnia, the books, series that are targeted at children tend to stay on the children's level all the way through the series. And I think that there are very few children who could go read a full series of books like that and appreciate it all at once during the same rough era of their lives, the 2 or 3 years. But whereas Harry Potter was targeted at every release being a hit, it grew so that by the time 7 books later were, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years after the first book was published, if the audience, the target audience was now 20 and the book was still targeted at an 11-year-old, probably wouldn't have done as well, right? Probably wouldn't be the phenomenon that we know it is today. But it's fascinating. The whole world is fascinating to me. I really, really, really appreciate it. We have a whole lot of Harry Potter stuff in this house, and I'm perfectly fine with it. Does it compare to The Lord of the Rings? No. Like, they're totally different stories. They're not even remotely close. And I couldn't say that if you like one, you'll like the other. I think that if you like reading, you'll like both, but that doesn't mean that if you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll like Lord of the Rings, or if you're Lord of the Rings fans, you'll like Harry Potter. And it also doesn't mean that you won't. I happen to love both, and I think that they're both equally important to the world of fantasy. There is a much broader spectrum of fantasy available today than there's ever been in the history of fantasy. For the longest time, fantasy was just this kind of epic, long, drudging story. It was basically alternate sci-fi. But because of Harry Potter, we now have this huge collection of really diverse fantasy, and I really have to point to the Harry Potter series and say that's what fueled it. Because once the series was done, those readers still wanted that level of writing, and thus, YA became a thing. And I'm not mad at that. I think that, as with anything that becomes popular, there are going to be a million knockoffs. And of those million knockoffs, there's only going to be 2 that are worth it, or whatever. That's just probably being hyperbolic there. There's going to be a handful of those million that are worth it. That doesn't mean that the others aren't worthy. It just means that when something gets that popular, it gives us options, and options give us the occasional spark of greatness. Harry Potter was that occasional spark of greatness that fueled the industry that we call fantasy today, and I think that's super important. So, should I read them again? Or, in the case of the last 3 books, should I read them at all? And are you interested in hearing my review as I work through them? Let me know in the comments. I will do that. I know that my book stuff here seems to be fairly popular-ish, so, if you want more reviews, I'll do more reviews. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is fallacious. It is an adjective meaning an idea or conclusion based on one or more false assumptions. Since my online subscriber list is double opt-in, accusing me of being a spammer is a wholly fallacious assumption. Fallacious. Fallacious. I'm not gonna go there. I'm just not. Never mind.